Thousands of US citizens are now renouncing their citizenship. However, I think it's important to realize exactly what that means and how it's implicated. Because if you're renouncing for tax reasons and you don't really know what you're doing or you don't have a plan, you are setting yourself up for failure. And if you watch until the end, I'll show you exactly how that plays out. Hello and welcome back to the Troubling Reports. Today we're going to go over US citizenship and how the increasing amounts of renunciations within the United States has a knock-on effect towards those who are entirely barred from the United States. And realistically, why you shouldn't renounce for tax reasons, as if you're renouncing for tax reasons, you're bad at business. And I don't say this to be hostile, I don't say this to be combative. However, realistically, with the increase in amounts of people screaming for renunciation, it takes a plan. And of course, step by step, I will give you a guide if you are looking for advice on jurisdictional stability and jurisdictional insights. Of course, I am doing one-pagers now instead of consulting, as I feel it is increasingly more important to get direct information rather than to get indirect information where, yes, I may be able to help you, but the time it takes would make it moot. So, of course, let's dive directly into this video. When I say international people really don't care about US citizenship, I mean it. Because many will actually prefer you to be a US citizen rather than renouncing, especially if you were born within the United States. And for tax reasons, of course, realistically, if you have a smart structure with people who, and countries who have tax treaties, say for instance this beautiful country of Georgia, then it's less of an issue. Of course, living here in Georgia, I realize more and more that there is a possibility of people reducing their taxes to near zero, if not zero, even as a US citizen. So if you're renouncing for tax reasons, it's moot. You can get down to zero or near zero regardless. But if you want a structure that protects your assets, that you don't have to report to anyone, that you don't have the constant watchful eye of the United States, then of course, renounce. And I'll even help you to do so if you click that subscribe button down below, as I plan to go over my own renunciation process within the near future. And of course, living across the world, living in societies where freedom is actually practiced, I've realized that more and more what people think of as freedom is not actually freedom. And often when criticism comes, people very much do not want freedom. They want simplicity. And I put another video on my channel where it is entirely that premise: simplicity versus freedom. And renouncing US citizenship is very complex. It's a very complex process, it's a very complex procedure, there's a lot of law involved, and realistically you shouldn't be doing it alone. But so many people are so caught up in, oh, I can save millions in taxes. Guess what? I can save millions in taxes and I'm an American. Not necessarily the hardest thing to do. However, what is hard is to gain that privacy, to gain that optionality of saying, oh, I don't want to spend time writing down exactly every asset that I own. And as a US citizen myself, who was born in the United States and who grew up in the United States, you realize that all you really want is actual freedom, as the United States tends to be what I would describe as a surveillance state, but with the allure and the marketing of a free state. Oftentimes, this is also what I would say about the EU, and about Australia, and about New Zealand. I do not see that the majority of the EU, or the majority of people within the EU, are actually able to realistically disagree with certain things. And of course, as I live around the world, I realize there's less and less free countries. And that's perfectly reasonable as a diagnosis for other issues. But of course, living across the world, living with people who actually do have the freedoms that most aspire to, you realize the way of creation of citizenships and the way of creation of optionality is the way of freedom. And it's freedom to choose rather than freedom from taxation. As Benjamin Franklin says, there are 3 things that are certain in this life. Or maybe it was 2. However, those are death and taxes. And to me, that statement is absolutely true, as those 2 things are largely unavoidable. And of course, you can optimize it. Of course, you can reduce your taxable income to near zero. However, you'll still pay VAT, still pay sales taxes. So ultimately, you are still paying taxes, and ultimately, your tax revenues are being used, though you can choose where those go to. And of course, that's what I go over on this channel. While I think that it's increasingly important to understand exactly how these levers work, I think that it's also important to have speed and have a plan. So if you are looking to create a roadmap to leave your home country, feel free to go down in the description below. I will link down there a Google Forms link where you can learn about the jurisdictions for a small one-time fee. And of course, if you need more help, there will be other offerings very soon. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like it. If you really enjoyed this video, feel free to share it with your friends. If you are looking for a way to globalize your life and learn the truth of what it means to truly be global, feel free to subscribe to this channel. This has been the Traveling Report, signing off.